formally celebrate a new partnership that we have established between them and the Environmental Studies program, and through the Just Impacts Memorial Internship. So this internship honors Justin's memory. He was a recent graduate from TAFT, from our program. He graduated in 2023 with a degree in Applied Environmental Studies. And he also happened to be one of the kindest students I have had the privilege of knowing. He was really passionate about environmental and social justice. And after graduating TAFT, he found, well, first an internship and then a full-time job at MassCEC, where he found that it was really fulfilling to his personal core mission. So after Justin passed away last year, his family, by the way, I want to welcome Patty and Steve, his parents who are joining remotely. Hi, and also John, his uncle, who I know is here. Hi, John, thank you for coming. His family really wanted to do something meaningful to carry forward his legacy of helping others and by also helping others themselves. So they have worked really tirelessly the last year and to make this happen. And I'm super proud to say that we were able to give the first internship this summer to a TAFT student, Mallory Ewing. I don't know if Mallory is here, but she's a sophomore and she was the first recipient and she just completed her internship this summer. So I'm really happy about that. And also, thanks to Justin's family, this internship will continue to be offered every summer. And I will pass along more details about the deadline and the application process later in the year, so stay tuned. But I just wanted to tell you, Patty and Steve, that we promise to continue to honor Justin's memory. And thank you so much from the bottom of our hearts, from TAFS, from the Environmental Studies program, from MassCEC, and for all the future students that will benefit from this amazing opportunity. Thank you. All right, and now we'd like to transition to introducing today's speakers, Dr. Jennifer LeBlond, who is the Managing Director at of the Emerging Climatetech at MassCEC. And she will be saying a few additional words about Justin's work at MassCEC and more about the amazing work that they do. And just briefly, because I know she will be talking more in detail about this, Dr. LeBlond has had a super interesting and international and robust career in the world of climate tech in general, I should say. She does have a PhD in geology, after which she pivoted to a full-time career in tech, and she has held different roles from technology management to development, and even dabbled in some science diplomacy on behalf of the UK. So I'm sure she will be telling you more, and I'm so happy you could be here today. So please help me welcome Dr. Jennifer LeBlond.
Hi, can you guys hear me okay? I'm going to project as much as possible, and I have a mic. So first, thank you ever so much for having me here. I love coming back to academia. It fulfills my heart with so much joy to see, you know, you guys. I wish I was in your situation. I can honestly say I had the best time at uni. So I just wanted to start the talk recognizing the incredible contribution that Justin made at MassCEC. I was not fortunate enough to be at MassCEC when he was there. I only joined last year in November, but I constantly speak to my colleagues about the incredible work that he did through our Accelerating Decarbonization team. And I really want to recognize this new opportunity for the internship, that it's going to be a game changer, not just for you if you want to apply for this, but it's so important that we have interns at MassCEC to bring that experience and the multidisciplinarity and have you as part of our team. So I just put up a few photos here because, you know, we can all recognize people, we know them as persons, but this is Justin in action. He was out engaging with the public, doing the work, interfacing with the next generation of clean tech folk. It is so important in our role, if we work in climate tech and clean technologies, that we're able to talk about what we do and make it relevant to the public, because why else are we doing it, right? Justin was so incredibly good at that. And the rest of my team also say that it wasn't just the critical path work that he did so well at MassCEC. It was also, he was member of the yoga club. You know, he had the cultural input there as well. And he left so many strong links and friendships at MassCEC. And so likewise, as Coco said, we're going to continue to honor his memory and keep on reminding ourselves of the influence that he had at MassCEC in our climate tech. So I'm going to move on a little bit to talk about me and my career in climate tech that I hope, you know, it might be of either of interest, or you can think, oh my goodness, I don't want to do that. So, you know, feel free to interrupt me or keep questions till the end. But I did just also want to flip back and acknowledge, thank you, Coco and Sinette, very much for this opportunity to talk. And we were talking a little bit before that I'm a representative of Mass Clean Energy Centre, MassCEC, so I am a quasi-government employee, but a lot of what I'm going to talk about today is a personal opinion, okay? So I hope you'll forgive me if I indulge this opportunity. So I started way back out, and thank you very much, Jurassic Park. I had dreams of being a paleontologist. I loved the idea of going into the fields and digging for bones. I was utterly useless at paleontology, but I did pivot over to another form of geology, which was more like petrology. So I found my calling in a geology degree, and I graduated from the University of Bristol. It's in the UK, in the west of the UK, for those unfamiliar. And after my undergraduate, I took a year off to go and work at the Natural History Museum. And as many of you guys will know, natural history museums have this beautiful facade where they cater to the public. But underneath in the foundations, they have some incredible research, scientific facilities. And so I worked in the bowels of the museum, looking at material characterization and looking at lots of different geological specimens, from aging to figuring out how they were formed and how they might be used going forwards. I loved it. And then in 2006, I was awarded a fellowship to go start my PhD at the University of Cambridge. And this was studying under Professor Clive Oppenheimer, looking at human health impacts from breathing in emissions from biomass and volcanic eruptions. So I did that until 2010, and then I continued a number of postdoctoral positions. And what I tried to get out of my postdoc, and of course it's easy to do a reflective analysis on your career at this stage in life, but what I tried to get out was I had this core understanding of geology that I built up from my undergraduate degree, but I really wanted to apply it to the human situation, the human and the environmental situation. So the way I described my work as a postdoc was medical geology, environmental health work. And so I looked at volcanic health emergencies. So every time there was a volcano that went off, everybody panicked because all the aircrafts couldn't fly through the volcanic plumes, and everybody was worried about breathing in all of that gas and particulate matter from the volcanoes. So I looked at what was in those particulates that would actually cause problems for respiratory health. I also did some work on a form of non-filarial elephantiasis called podoconiosis. And we think it's formed by people who walk barefoot on volcanic soils. And some minerals from those volcanic soils get up into your lymphatic system and block your lymphatic system. So I worked with some medical doctors in the UK and in Ethiopia with that work. I went on to do a little bit of work in chronic kidney disease, specifically in Nicaragua and some of the Central American countries. Again, looking at how sugarcane farmers and workers are in conditions of awful heat and extreme dehydration, and it can really cause chronic problems with their kidney. And again, I looked at the impact of nickel laterite mining. So, you know, those are ridiculous geology words, but effectively that's where we get most of our nickel, copper, cobalt from. So I wanted to look at the human health impacts from mining. And then in 2015, I brought my Imperial College Fellowship over to UMass Lowell to work with some collaborators. And then my first, what I'm going to call my life lesson, really happened in 2016 when I had my first child. So I was over in the US, I was a visiting scholar, and I had a baptism of fire into your healthcare system like no other. So in 2017, so I actually was fortunate enough to receive a full year's maternity leave with my fellowship. That's something that's a little bit more common in the UK. And then in 2017, I was asked to join an agri-tech, a spin out of MIT, looking at potassium. You can see here there's a rock up on the right-hand side. It's a potassium-rich feldspar rock. So looking at how we might process these rocks and make a potassium-rich fertilizer to put on plants. Then comes my second life lesson. So COVID hit, you'll all be fairly familiar with that. And my second child was born on the 1st of March, 2020. So my child was a COVID child, and 10 days later, the company that I work for collapsed. So I was 2 children in, no job. The kicker in this is my partner also lost his job at the same company. So COVID was fun, let's just say that. My second life lesson here is that startup life is high risk, right? Okay, so got everybody out of the COVID depression, and we, in the latter end of 2020, I ended up joining the Harvard Technology Office of Technology Development. Now, I made a conscious decision here. Where do I want to go with my career? Do I want to go back to a startup? No, too high risk. Do I want to go and understand how research is being developed out of universities and being commercialized along the pipeline? Yes. So I went and sat in the technology development side of an academic institute, and I had a lot of fun for nearly 2 years. But during that time, I also thought, what am I not so good at in this role? And that is the venture capital side of things. Where's the money coming from? How is this all being funded? So I applied and got accepted onto a Venture Universities accelerator over in San Francisco, and did that for 6 months to upskill myself on exactly what investors are looking for when they are looking at research that's coming out of universities. And then in 2022, I thought, what a great opportunity to go and join the British Consulate. If you're familiar, it's in Kendall Square. And that was really looking at developing relationships between the UK and the US in science and tech. It was brilliant. It was a lot of fun. We got to do a lot of great events and go and recognize some really influential people. But we were nearing to the point of the election, and we saw the change in the winds. And for those of you who are familiar, I was the one reading Project 2025 and starting to really worry about what was going to happen in innovation and climate tech. And so an opportunity came up, and I was able to start a role at Massachusetts Clean Energy Center. And this really is a role helping develop statewide innovation in climate tech. So again, this was my 6th life lesson, really helping to support the statewide efforts. And I should also say, during this whole journey here, I became a US citizen, and both my children are US citizens, and my husband got another job as well. So all's well that ends well. But by no means is this a regular trajectory through climate tech. What is the moral I'm trying to articulate here? You can do whatever you want to do. So many disciplines, so many, and you can come back and work in climate tech. And you know what? That's valued. That's really appreciated, that you bring all this experience to come back to climate tech. So I've listed out my life lessons here, but I really wanted to articulate this point here down at the bottom. Somebody once said to me, and I have a number of people that I consider my mentors in my life. If you don't have a mentor, think about getting one. It's really important that you have somebody to aspire to and look up to in the future. Find out whatever you're weak at and strengthen it. I love that idea, because there's a reflection here, like there's an acknowledgement that we are flawed. We have, things that we need to work on, and strengthen it. So what motivates me in my current role at MassCEC? We need innovation to help us deal with the most pressing global issues. Innovation is hugely intertwined with multidisciplinary approaches, and you bring together these insights, these methodologies, these expertise from diverse fields to address complex issues. It's this idea of systems thinking here, right? I know the climate tech community value and encourage interdisciplinarity. And also, having gone through a period of had 2 children, I have this innate understanding of thinking for future generations. This intergenerational solidarity is something that sits with me and I think about often. So I think it's worth going back to why Climatetech and why now, right? You don't need to know the details of this graph on the left, on your right. Suffice to say that you've got annual energy use going up on the y-axis, and the x-axis is your year. So we are somewhere in the middle, and you can see the general trend here is for energy use going up. This is purely for data center use. It's not whole energy use. But you can see that is a pretty steep angle that we're expected. So what are we talking about when we talk about the energy transition? And I know some people are triggered by the word transition. It may not be a transition, it may be a transformation, or it may be an addition, right? So we need more energy. The world is facing ever increasing energy demands, and that transition, or whatever we want to call it, transformation to energy, just becomes much more complicated. We need to reduce emissions. It is imperative that we reduce the emissions to combat climate change, and we require the adoption of these low carbon technologies to do it. We can't just do it from traditional fossil fuels generating energy. And these climate tech solutions need to be innovative to offer scalable, sustainable solutions to address these challenges. And I think this is really important as well. When we're talking about climate tech, we are also talking about building up our resilience. We're making sure that we can face those climate impacts and that we have this environmental and economic stability. So that is the problem. But what is the situation we're facing right now? And again, it's important to acknowledge that the change at the federal level is really challenging. Have we been in this situation before? Yes. Climate tech and clean energy wasn't always so well funded. A decade ago, it was very challenging to get your technology off the ground. But now we're really facing some problems. And this is just a selection of articles from Massachusetts-based media, really in the June, July area. And I bring this up because this was a pivotal time for climate tech. A lot of companies, a lot of young venture startups lost federal funding from the Department of Energy, DOE, to do their scale-up projects. And so you'll notice that there are numbers like $87 million that Sublime Systems, for example, ceased to have from the federal funding pot. And so, you know, again, I go back to this point that a lot of us saw this coming, but really when you're on a project plan as a startup, it's very difficult to pivot hugely and enormously to take into account the loss of federal funding. So we acknowledge this was a huge blow to the climate tech sector and to innovation, full stop. So it's important again, okay, so we have this remit that we need to install technologies that help us reduce the emissions, but also help us increase the amount of energy that we can use. We're in a really tough spot right now in the US. But why can we lead in Massachusetts? What's so unique about Massachusetts that we can really take charge? We have world-class research institutes, and you're sitting in the center of one, the highest density of innovation, entrepreneurs, science and tech really comes from the greater Boston area. You are in a vibrant startup community. If you don't know already, you have so many resources at your fingertips that you should take advantage of. And collectively, you have community that understands the needs, the challenges, can group together to be this dynamic network of just startups and looking at how you commercialize these novel solutions. We're an amazing state looking at public-private partnerships. So there are few states who do it better than us, right? This link between the private sector with the industry, with the money, and our startup community. We do it well, we could do it better, and we'll talk about that later. But this is something that is very well known here and fostered. And of course, Massachusetts has this commitment to sustainability. We have our pathway to net zero that our Governor Healy, is still very much on course for. And we prioritize sustainability through innovation, and we look at how we address climate mitigation and adaptation and resilience. So my point about this talk is, okay, we're in a really tough spot, but states can step up. And it's people like me, people like my colleagues and my community that I really think need to not necessarily fill the gap, but we need to show what we're capable of. We in Massachusetts exemplify proactive climate strategies and innovation. So there's this really pivotal number here that 35% of the path to net zero, so that amount of emissions that need to be reduced, is going to be addressed by technologies not on the market. So they're all incubating, they're all kind of, you know, in your head somewhere, and we need to get them out. So we need to support the development of that 34% to hit our net zero targets. And you know what? Climate tech is a huge economic activity, a huge economic opportunity. So we have this growing year on year by 25%, and there's headroom for it to grow even more. And I look to you guys because you can be the next generation of employees in climate tech. And I hope that you will feel assured that that is a long-term strategy if that's what you indeed want to do. So let's hone in a little bit about MassCEC. As I mentioned, we're a quasi-government agency. We're a state economic development agency, and we're dedicated to growing the clean energy sector. And we want to spur job creation, deliver those environmental benefits, and look at securing long-term economic growth for the people of Massachusetts. I say this loosely because, of course, we want to concentrate on the state of Massachusetts, but we're in this together, right? This is a global wide initiative, and we hope Massachusetts can lead at the state level. So what are we doing at MassCEC to support climate tech? I think it's important just to perhaps divide up the sectors that we work in. I won't linger too much on this. Suffice to say that my division that I run as managing director is in the top right corner there, the emerging climate tech. So you imagine all of the stuff that's coming out of the university, all of the stuff that's incubating in those spin-outs of the labs and looking at the accelerators, incubators, how we support that ecosystem. Everything's pre-revenue, pre-commercialization. That's what I concentrate on. My colleagues over at Accelerating Decarbonisation, those are all the public-facing programs. So that is Solar for All, that's our electric school buses, that's in a market, it's an established route by which the technologies from emerging climate tech can come through. And we work a lot between us with policymakers to make sure that there is, let's say, agreeable policy to pull through our technologies, right? We also have two amazing other divisions at MassCEC. One is our workforce development. And if you're familiar with that, or perhaps you should be, that's where all the internships go through. So they work with collective students, you know, people who have just graduated to do internships within our startup and climate tech community. But they also work with the internal MassCEC interns as well. And then we have our large-scale deployment of offshore energy. If you're astute and you're aware, that actually has changed from being offshore wind because of what is a bit more palatable, let's say, to the federal administration at this point. So offshore energy includes everything from offshore wind to looking at how we might harness the energy of the ocean, looking at carbon capture, usage and storage in ocean settings, for example. And we all work in kind of synergy together, and we are all under this umbrella of climate tech. And again, it's also worth noting that traditionally we used to consider climate tech as very restricted clean tech, looking at how we mitigate emissions. But now, as recently as last year, we've expanded our definition to encompass this adaptation and resilience piece as well. And I think it's an important recognition there because we're not just looking at how we reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Back to what I was originally saying, we're looking at how we protect ourselves against problems in the future, if they're climate related or not. So think battery storage, think resilience on the grid for neighborhoods who are at risk during, you know, storm events, think flooding barriers, think, you know, all of these kind of things that we can put in place to help us be more resilient. And in terms of the themes that we cover, we can bucket them into energy, agriculture, food and nature, buildings, transportation, industry and manufacturing, and carbon management. So these are huge, broad. We've gone from a relatively narrow clean tech, climate tech definition all the way out to broad. So we want to support more technologies at this point. And we have a plan. So familiar with the Mass Leads Act that was passed last November, that dedicated a portion of the state budget towards this for a 10-year plan. And as part of that, MassCEC put together this is such a mouthful, Massachusetts Climate Tech Strategy and Implementation Plan. That is our roadmap for the next 10 years. That tells us exactly what we need to do to accelerate the climate tech industry. And we're going to do that in 3 main buckets. One is invest. We're going to invest in companies and infrastructure. We're going to support the growth of climate tech in Massachusetts. We're going to accelerate. This is so amazing what we already have here. We just need to turbocharge what's being done. We want to make Massachusetts the best place in the world for doing business. And then we want to connect. We want to make sure that we are talking amongst ourselves. We're collaborating. We're in this as a team together to make sure that we can grow the climate tech ecosystem on a state and global scale. And I put this up here. This is a document that you can see public facing on our website, but it basically tries to identify all of the different regions across the state and look at the unique properties in climate tech. And of course, we're sitting in the greater Boston area. It's always easy to talk about the benefits of climate tech and the work that's going on in greater Boston. It's the densest cluster in Massachusetts. But we have amazing assets across the state. From the Northeast, looking at advanced manufacturing and the high-skilled labor, down to the Southeastern Cape and looking at all of their offshore energy and blue economy work, over to Central, looking again at advanced manufacturing, WPI, for example, Pioneer Valley, we're looking at UMass Amherst and all of their incredible capabilities for industrial scale-up and manufacturing. And then out to the Berkshires, looking at how we develop the ag tech leadership out at the Berkshire Innovation Center, for example. So if you have some time, I do encourage you to go and have a look at this. And below this map on our website, there's an interactive map as well that you can go and interrogate all our climate tech assets across the state. It's just useful to know, what we have as a collective organization. And I have to say, this the system, the university academic system you have is so incredibly strong among institutes as well. So I would encourage you to really fully understand what assets, equipment, facilities, and capabilities you have across the state. And so in my team, in the Emerging Climate Tech division within MassCEC, we really have a number of goals and missions. One is to make sure we reach these climate ambition goals faster and more effectively. That's our whole purpose. We want to increase local jobs and amplify that economic development opportunity. We want to promote equity in climate tech. Everybody knows that diverse opinions is the key to having a great, innovative startup. We want to reduce the cost of energy for Massachusetts residents. There's no point in doing this if we're going to greenwash and glorify the use, if it's not ultimately cheaper for Massachusetts residents. And we do this specifically in 3 ways in my division. First of all, we offer grants, and these are what we term non-dilutive grants. So we don't take a stake in the company by giving them grants. It's like a federal grant. Here's your money. We have milestones that you need to meet, and we will give you that money according to meeting those milestones. We also have a fund, nominally about $50 million, that we can deploy in equity investment. So there, in some way, shape, or form, we buy a little bit of the company, and that's it. You're in partnership with MassCEC for the long term here. So we are vested in the interest of your company and making you successful. And we have 32 companies in our portfolio that we foster and we love and we support and we really fly the flag for in Massachusetts. And we very recently have a business development support. And for those of you familiar with business development, these are the connectors. These are the people that make all the introductions. They make smart, strategic recommendations about what companies should be doing. And that is open to anybody in Massachusetts. And I would encourage you, I'll go onto a further slide later, to go and look at one of the statewide initiatives that we've set up called Business Front Door. But really, what is our main North Star? We want to make Massachusetts the climate tech innovation lab for the world. And I talked about, I'm going to go through the grants and the equity and the business development. If we were to look at this in a schematic representation, we look at the y-axis here is the available funding. The x-axis here is your stage of development. We sometimes term it technology readiness level, TRL, but for all intents and purposes, we look at it here as the sliding scale from idea to research to prototype to demonstrate to enter the market and to eventually scale up. And that blue bucket there is really where Massachusetts Clean Energy Center fits in. So our grants aim to fill that bucket. As you'll appreciate, this federal funding research curve has somewhat decreased, let's say, and so our Massachusetts Clean Energy Center bucket has also responded to that, and we've slightly enlarged what we can support at the moment. But it's important, again, because we are forming, you guys may be familiar with this, the bridge over the valley of death that we like to term for innovation, linking all of those early stage research to really get it through the commercialization pipeline and funded by private investors. And so this is what it looks like in practice. This is the array of programs that we have. I want to just start weirdly, again, looking at the axis that we have here. So again, we're always trying to put the money up the y-axis. On the x-axis, it's a similar scale as the one you saw before, looking at the research to all the way through to the scale up. But now we have that TRL scale, so introducing technology readiness levels. So first of all, at the bottom here, we have something incredible, and I would encourage you guys to look at it if you haven't already, these clean energy internships. So that's what I was referencing, that our workforce development team really look at. And we offer an extraordinary number of internships to go into startups from people such as yourselves when you graduate, when you're finishing, and over your summer periods as well. And then the next thing that I'll indicate is the big red band here. That's our equity. So that's the 2030 fund. That's the $50 million fund that we have that we can deploy every year. We have it broken down into small packets of funding that we can deploy, and then we effectively are equity stakes in a company. But the others, so Catalyst, DICEs, Innovation Ecosystem Program, Amplify Mass, Innovate Mass, Critical Mass, and our newest program I'll talk a little bit more about, climate testing and demonstration assets. These are all programs that we run, that we give money, non-dilutive, to support all the way along the stages of commercialization, all the way from you guys having amazing ideas coming out of academic institutes through to actually scaling up and penetrating the markets at the end. So this is our way of responding to the federal challenges, right? So we have a proportion of funding that comes from state. We have these amazing programs, and we've set up new programs in response to lack of funding and other sources from typically federal level. And we have created new programs. So Critical Mass is one of our newest programs that's come out that effectively aims to couple a startup with an industry player. And so last week, we had 189 concept papers from startups that want to work with industry partners. We are only awarding 3, and they're $1 million awards each. So you can see the demand for this. You can see there is a very pressing need to couple startups with industry players, and we're trying to start that process. Of course, we can afford to give funding for 3, but we have now set up the opportunities for other people to step in with funding. So industry players now can see all the opportunities, see the breadth of the startups, and pose their problem statements to the startups. So it's not just about handing out money, it's about creating a platform for people to then launch off themselves. And I just put this article, if you guys haven't and you want to get the kind of latest update, the Boston Globe has this wonderful Innovation Beat newsletter that comes out electronically, and they were helpful in promoting our latest Critical Mass and Testing and Demonstration Assets program that we recently launched. And Testing and Demonstrations program is also really important because that is nominally $20 million that we have to deploy this year to academic institutes such as Tufts to build out equipment that can then be used by the climate tech community. So there is money available, and we are trying to kind of deploy it in the best ways possible to maximize the impact to the whole community. We also have a tax incentive program. We wouldn't be a government agency if we didn't have a tax incentive program. So that's going to be launching at the end of this year. And that's mostly applicable to climate tech startups that want to grow their business over time. So not so useful for academic communities. And I mentioned I would talk a little bit about business development. We've stood up in the last couple of months this portal called Business Front Door, where any company can come in and they can say, I am business X, I want to grow, I want to do X, Y, Z in Massachusetts. And they they will be effectively assigned to a Team Massachusetts player, of which MassCEC is one of them. So traditionally, it's really difficult to do business in a state and you don't have a lot of state support. We've changed that in Massachusetts, and MassCEC is dealing with all of the climate tech companies that come through. And I think our roster now includes about almost 200 inquiries that we've been fielding here. So we're really hoping to make sure that, as I go back to, Massachusetts is the best place to do business. It's the easiest. It doesn't have the friction. And I just wanted to touch a little bit, I'm probably rattling through time here. We have some really amazing examples of climate tech companies that we've helped foster. So one, if you're not familiar, it's called Carla Systems. They actually presented at the Building Plus event that was held over the road at Tufts, I think 2 months ago. They're an incredible company. They're effectively a smart water heater. So whereas you have this enormous, cumbersome gas-fired boiler in your basement that just constantly keeps water heated, this knows your showering and hot water needs over time. It learns intelligently through, AI modeling, and then it can predict when you need hot water, and it will only produce the amount that you need. So it saves customers money. I think I don't need to read through, but this is basically just a timeline of the support that Massachusetts Clean Energy Center has been able to provide people like Carla through the different grant funds. And the thing that I want to get out here is we are catalytic, right? Massachusetts steps in and says, hey, we recognize you're a great company and we want to support you. And so others then say, oh, that's quite a good idea. I think I will co-invest. It provides confidence to the emerging market. And we are so proud to support Carla Systems in that respect. Another company I just wanted to quickly go through is New Grid. And I love this. It's the Waze of the transmission grid. And I said, well, why not Google Maps? And someone's like, oh, Waze is so much better. It actually gives you, congestion and predictive maps about where you should go in real time, as opposed to, apparently, as I understand, Google Maps is less of the real-time aspect. So this is exactly what New Grid planned to do. They look at peak shaving, so when energy demand is the highest. They look at how they distribute and create resilience across the grid, again, through software and some implementation of hardware. And again, they have had a huge success through our grant systems, not enormous amounts of money here, but now they managed to build out. They are working not just in Massachusetts, but across the world. So they've really developed and grown into a flourishing company. So I've done my kind of speech about what MassCEC does, and I want to just sort of penultimate slide end on this impact. I think it's important to say this. We anticipate that we'll be able to support about 1,300 companies through our implementation strategy and plan. We'll create about 3,500 jobs. We'll look at training to 25,000 individuals. And again, going back to this point about being additive, catalytic, we want to attract 7 times the investment that we put in. And that's through direct and indirect investment as well. So if you imagine you have a startup company that, a co-investor will come and invest in, help the company flourish. But when that company has a facility, a base, a headquarters, it's all the subsidiary services that they support as well. So those employees will need to go out and get food. They will need housing. They will have families and they need childcare. So this is really capturing this systems approach thinking in the climate tech ecosystem. And on the right-hand side, I really underpin the need for this. 34% of the emissions required to get to that net zero target are going to come from tech that are in your minds right now. And we need this tech. It's imperative. We need this tech, not just to supply the growing energy demand, but also to hit our net zero targets. Double win. And then I put the final kind of stage here because I get myself caught in a bit of a funk and a bit of a rut about the situation we're facing. It's really tough at the moment, and we're constantly talking to our climate tech ecosystem members, and they're telling us it is terrible times. But I think I'd like to end on, what can we do as a community? And I include you guys because environmental studies is so important as a pipeline to thinking about careers in climate tech. Stay the course. We need the innovation. We need the innovation that's not greenwashing. It's not going to be more expensive on the market, but it does things that are faster, cheaper, cleaner, and fairer. We need to alter the narrative and not the goal. And I think there are so few people who say this at the moment. We're not going to stop doing what we're doing in climate tech. We just need to talk about it in a different way, okay? So we need to meet that rising energy demand, and we need those energy efficient technologies. We need to strengthen the ecosystem. We need to come together. We need to collaborate, share insights, experiences, challenges, and rewards amongst the community. We need to continue to listen to what our challenges are and be responsive. And I hope you'll see that MassCEC is listening and responding in the ways that we can to these challenges. And these challenges are complex, but we can be targeted with our support. We need to recognize the value of academia and underpin that importance of private partnership. So rest assured, I know that times are tough at the moment in academia. Looking ahead, we know that you guys coming out of academic institutes, you form the beginning of the pipeline. If we don't have that beginning of the pipeline, the whole thing falls flat. We need to find better ways to support academic institutes. And we need to disrupt the market, stop greenwashing, make Massachusetts the climate tech innovation capital of the world. So I want to end there. I'm very happy to take questions, but as you can see, I'm quite passionate about this. Many of the opinions that I've expressed are my own, and I just want to leave you with two other things. So somebody gave me some really great advice when I first became a parent. Two things. This too shall pass, usually when you're like in a really bad situation with a child and you're like, I don't know what's going on, I don't know what's happening. You know, this too shall pass. And the second point is, I've just promptly forgotten the second point as well. That's how well it sticks in my brain. So this too shall pass, and choose your battles. Choose your battles. And I think that's what the approach that I would take. There's also another third bit of advice, which is always bring snacks, but that's not applicable to climate tech. So I'd like to end it with that. You know, choose your battles, do what we can do at the time and is appropriate. And, you know, this too shall pass. And it might take a few years, but we're in this for the long run. And that you have people like me that really are advocates for climate tech coming through. And I just applaud, you know, the work that you guys are doing. And I think that you would do incredibly well in climate tech careers. And I, you know, encourage every single one of you to pursue what you're good at and what you enjoy. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for that optimistic talk. And it's really nice, at least for me, to know that we live in a state that cares about things like that and provides much prospect for the future, especially for people who are about to enter this field. So I guess I can kick us off with a question. And my question is, we started to talk about this when we were talking before the talk, but we couldn't finish. So here we go. So we're at a time where top scientists are being recruited actively by other countries right now. And you also mentioned the mission of Climatetech, MassCEC, to be one of the global leaders in this type of field. So what is MassCEC doing to attract and retain that talent before it's too late?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And I wish I had a more optimistic answer, but I'm going to give you as realistic as I can. We have assigned a larger proportion of money to some of our earlier stage academic research programs. That said, the number of applications that we're getting is going to be vastly reduced this time because we have a prerequisite that you need to bring prime funding with you. So again, that additive catalytic funding that we produce. So there's not as much money coming from the federal level, that's NSF, that's DOE. And so not as many people are applying with that prime funding to one of our programs. We are looking at standing up fellowships in the entrepreneurial kind of space as well. So watch this space for that. That's trying to address at least a pathway to getting, you know, people such as yourselves who are entering the workforce and good ideas into the commercialization pipeline. It is something that we talk about in Team Mass internally a lot. It's horribly called the brain drain. And I also see it very astutely from my previous position working for the UK government, because I was effectively doing that. I was trying to poach talent from Massachusetts to go and work in the UK. So I know the tactics and I know how to quell them. But no, it's a very serious problem. And we were just talking before as well, it's not just the established academics, it's our international community at large. You are in a situation here where we have no confidence that there is a pathway for, and I know we need to do something to address that as well. But for, certainly the climate tech space, we are trying to redirect funding to fill a little bit of the gap that is being caused by the change in federal circumstance. Yeah.
Okay, maybe a more positive question while others think more practical, I guess. Can you tell us a bit more about the training programs and also maybe of relevance for this particular audience, the MassCEC internship program, which I know many of our students take advantage of, and I believe you're still taking applications for the fall?
I think it's still open.
It's still open, right?
It's just still open for this quarter, the end of this quarter. Yeah, so I'm probably not the best person to talk on the internships, but if anybody has an inkling of interest, come and see me and I'll put you in touch with the right people, because we have, in my division, we have fellows in the investment side, we have fellows in the tech to market team that issue all of those grants. And we should be taking on a business development fellow at some point in the future as well. And what do you get by being an internal MassCEC intern? You are like plopped right in alongside us. So you do events with us, you do the ins and outs, the workings of the programs, you go and see some of the climate tech startups that we see, you share our whole journey. And so we like to think it's an amazing immersion into what we do at all levels across MassCEC as well. You'll interact with the CEO all the way through to everybody along the other divisions in MassCEC. So we've had huge success with Tufts applicants. They are so highly valued because we're an organization of 130 people, so we're small, but we need extra capacity and we need your experience to come and tell us what it's out in the field, right? So we value your input. Yeah.
Thank you.
That was a wonderfully stimulating talk. I really appreciate you coming here and taking the time. You project confidence. You also project just a willingness to listen and hear and engage with customers of any type, from the user to the tech startup. And I'm wondering, life in academia that you experience is often very, solitary. And I'm wondering if there were moments in your time, in your training, where you found that a weakness of sort of that very sort of internal, you decided to sort of think about, how do you work effectively with people? How do you listen? I'm trying to imagine a day in your life at your work and sort of the way where people skills are really central to your success.
It's such a great question. And very personal as well for me, because I would love nothing better than to sit in a library for 12 hours of every day, look through research papers and write summary papers and go deep into the technical side of things. We were talking before, I'm a lapsed geologist. I loved what I did, but I struggle with the social aspect of things as well. I'm a do by practice, so I have to be very intentional when I'm networking with people, and I have to prepare a lot to speak. But I will say that this role allows me to interact with all sorts of people. So I speak with the very technical chief operating officer at X Climatetech startup. And I also speak to customers out in the field, and we'll go and speak to residents in, Billerica to talk about what they want from their community solar installation, for example. So I speak to a diverse, and I love it. I find so much, it brings me so much joy to know that, I can go out and interact with all sorts of different people of different walks of life, of different, you know, abilities and understandings of climate tech, and try and articulate the importance of why we need to integrate climate tech into our lives. And I do it on a personal level as well. I just became an EV driver, for example, and I try and practice what I preach, and I try and go out into the community and be genuine with the message that I'm delivering. And this confidence is a little bit of a show, I think, but the passion is not. I wholeheartedly believe in what we are doing at MassCEC. You know, there are sometimes I get exasperated because one of the points that I put up there is change the narrative, not actually the thing you're doing. Like, there's so much time that we're wasting changing the narrative. We just need to do the action that brings climate tech into play. But, you know, we're doing it for a higher purpose. And I really believe in that. I believe we need to leave this world in at least the same or better state for our next generations. So yeah, but it's a struggle on a personal level. And I would encourage, you know, anybody to think it's possible, even if you are an introvert, and I would have loved a career in academia, loved it. But I moved over here and I found different courses, and I feel like every single pathway that I've taken has been led to something. Yeah.
Is this working? Oh, this was phenomenal, and I'm feeling very worked up by everything you're saying. But I wanted to know if you could comment a little bit more on the shift away from offshore winds. You touched on that briefly as like a pivot, but it's been very discouraging to see the executive actions just stopping these projects. And so I'm curious what you're doing to either continue them or
Yep.
pivot that energy.
Infuriating, yeah. And my fellow MD on the I keep on trying to say it's the offshore energy side of things, is constantly plagued by, you know, these kind of issues. Yes, it has been horrific for the offshore wind industry recently, and I think even more so that the vast proportion of many of these projects are actually complete. There are nacelles in the water, and there are blades being installed as we speak. And yet they have been shut down purely for political purposes. It's still a quarter of the work that we do at MassCEC. We don't shy away from supporting innovation in offshore wind specifically. We've broadened the remit of our offshore wind group to ocean energy, just to recognize that. But no, we will be announcing the awardees for a new program that we stood up that I think cumulative is going to distribute about $30 million into this broad area by the end of September. So that's on Ocean Innovation Network, strengthening the capabilities that Massachusetts has for the blue economy. And that includes some offshore wind innovation in there as well. And very much we will support offshore wind. One of our companies in our portfolio is a company called Triton Anchor, and they are a floating anchor solution for larger depths where you can't actually put the pylon in the bedrock. You have this floating solution. So up in the Gulf of Maine, for example, they can situate turbines in the deeper waters. So no, we're change the narrative, not the game, right? Like we're continuing. What I think I will say from a personal point of view is I am cautious about the eye of Sauron being on us. So I'm trying to not be provocative. I'm just trying to do what makes sense. And it makes sense to incorporate offshore wind into our energy supply system. And actually, the UK is a great example of that. Huge majority of the wind, of the energy that we generate comes from offshore wind sources. So it makes sense. We're going to continue funding it and continue, but it's tough. Yeah, it's a great question.
All right, we're at time, so we probably should leave it at that, but I invite all of you to continue the conversation. Are you able to stay for a few minutes?
Yeah, sure.
So time to talk to Dr. LeBlanc. Thank you so much.